Welcome to wasmCloud Wednesday for December the 1st, 2021. As usual, we like to get started with the demo. Jordan will kick off. Off to you. You're on mute.
Yep. Thank you, Liam. Let me see. I haven't done this in a while. So today I've been playing with share. Yeah. So I've been playing with HashiCorp recently released, in technical preview, their Nomad pack project, which I've been calling Helm chart for Nomad. Someone can probably speak more elegantly to it, but I wanted to play with it and see how quickly we could get, wasmCloud deployed into Nomad. So I spent a few days, created this repo, and more or less, it's exactly what it is. I have a vagrant file here, which spins up an environment with Nomad and console. The reason I'm doing that is I had a lot of problems getting the networking working on my Mac, and it seemed to work just fine on Linux. So if you pick this up and just try and do the Nomad pack run on your Mac, you're probably going to get an error or something along the lines of like the networking layer is not working. So that's something to figure out eventually. But until, it's a very simple README, but we're gonna go through it here and see what we can do. So how do I need a new share. I think this is it. Is this the right screen? Can you see this? Okay. So I have two new terminals. So all I've done here is I've gone and I've cloned that repo down and started the vagrant file and in the background. I didn't want to do that live because it takes like 5 minutes to get up and running. So at this point, we have I'll flip back to the terminal here in a second. We have Nomad and console being ran. You know what? We're just going to show the whole desktop. We have Nomad and console being running locally. So Nomad pretty much in its generic developer deployment, and console in its generic developer deployment. And at this point, what we're going to do is you can do one of two things. You can do like a Nomad pack run and then point it straight at the pack like that. Or the pretty cool thing about this is once it's deployed into GitHub, correctly, we can add it as a registry. So so that points to the thing, it goes out, gets it. Now when we do we list the registries, it's pretty ugly output, but you'll see down here at the bottom we have a wasmCloud attached to Nomad pack. So now, just to show that it's not using the GitHub repo anymore, we'll back out of it, and we can just do a Nomad pack run, give it the registry, and tell them to run the wasmCloud host. And now when we go over here, it's going to report as unhealthy for a minute, but we'll start to see wasmCloud pop up. And it takes about 30 seconds for it to get healthy. But once it is running, we have more or less, so I have two jobs running right now, a Nats job and a wasmCloud job, and they actually talk via the console, via the console service mesh. So in essence, if we went over here and added an intention and did not allow wasmCloud to talk to Nats, things would stop working. Sorry, the Zoom bar keeps covering up my tabs, making this impossible. Yeah, so now that we've got wasmCloud up and running, we'll click on this allocation, And then it's kind of like, Kubernetes. We'll have, we see this HTTP port down here, 4,000, which is, and then we have wasmCloud running in Nomad, being exposed via Nomad mechanisms. Now there is a current, I'm not going to call it a bug because it's not a bug. There's an issue right now that the washboard will get in this continuous refresh loop, and it has something to do with the web socket is getting a 403 forbidden. So that's not something I've had the ability to troubleshoot yet, but that's what I'll be doing next. So at this point, in about, if you have a Nomad deployment already on a Linux machine, and you can just install Nomad pack, from HashiCorp's repository, and then in 2 lines have wasmCloud up and running. And if you want to send the Nats the Nats job some configuration, then we can very quickly just have these join a larger lattice. So yeah, I mean, that's it. I'm not an expert on Nomad. I'm not an expert on console, but spent about 3 days playing with this, and it, other than the WebSocket problem that I'll figure out, it's been a very enjoyable experience. And at this point, as long as you point wash, I didn't set it up at the right port and everything, it works as expected as well. So I really haven't experienced that many issues with it at this point. So that is about it.
It's amazing. There's one question. It's probably just because I don't really know that much about like the Nomad pack stuff, but are the wasmCloud hosts, are they launched inside the Vagrant box, or are they launched on your machine proper?
So Nomad is running on the Vagrant box, specifically only because I was having networking issues with OS X. So Vagrant is not necessary if I were to be on like a straight up Linux box. I'm sure there's a way to get the networking working on the Mac. I just hadn't figured it out yet. So then what is happening is Nomad is using the Docker driver and deploying it on, so it's scheduling it onto Docker that is also running on the Vagrant box. So you can kind of see that. Let's see, if we go to the host, templates, and the template, we can see it is, there you go. The runtime's just using the driver Docker, using the image. I'm not even sending it any fancy flags. And then up here, I don't know why I call that web, that's Nats, but that's Nats running in Docker as well. And they're connecting via the console connect sidecar. So this right here is only required because console needs some mechanism to do a health check, and that TechM makes Nats turn on a web server that I could get a 200 from.
Jordan, I have 2 things.
Yeah.
Could you go back to I think it was in the Nomad view where you saw like the CPU and memory usage of wasmCloud?
Yep. Let's see. Yep, go there, we'll go there, and we go into the allocation. Yeah, so we have CPU and memory. I think there's oh, there you go. There's a bigger view right there.
Awesome. I mean, this is just, it's cool to have like the extra little metrics, but really neat, like how low the passive utilization of resources is for a wasmCloud host.
And something I've kind of breezed through, if we were to go to console and we click on the wasmCloud host here, we get this topology. John, in its own is pretty simple at this point, but we do have the ability, if we were to expose some sort of like Prometheus metrics to, in this same topology view, have them configured right there in that gray box. So we can actually see like how much traffic it's sending to Nats or whatnot. Or we can just like break it by coming over here and saying that wasmCloud is not allowed to talk to Nats. Don't really know what that's going to do, but we can do it. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty fun project. I can see that there's a lot of things we could do here, and even to the point where Nomad gives you the ability to do custom drivers. So there is a world where we could use the same Nomad pack thing to say something like driver equals wasmCloud, and then in the config be like actor provider link, and actually deploy use Nomad as a scheduler for actual wasmCloud payloads. But that is not something I've delved into too much. Just know that it's possible.
That would be really cool if there's a lot of people who are like on Nomad and they're like, interested in wasmCloud. That sounds like a great, additional thing we could try. I don't really know what there is that goes into writing a Nomad driver. That would be cool.
Yeah. So that is it.
I think this is awesome, Jordan. Great job, buddy. I think that it's just really cool to see it, see it happen. And I think it's an awesome contribution. So thank you so much for all the hard work on this. Any other questions for Jordan?
No questions other than just the general comment that this is fantastic. Loved everything about this demo.
Yeah, it's just great, Jordan. And you're such an awesome community member. I'm so glad that you care and you see the vision here for where we're going, and you continue to show up and just contribute in so many ways. So I really appreciate it. Yep. And I think that, I really think that we are working on what the future looks like, is this what we're doing. So thank you.
I'm just here to hang out with Brooks.
Speaking of hanging out with Brooks, you're hanging out in a different place these days, aren't you?
Yeah, same, same physical cube of work in this area, but, I think we kind of talked about it maybe about 2 weeks ago, but today is actually my last day at Capital One. So I will officially be full-time doing wasmCloud and Cosmonic things come tomorrow, which is super exciting. I'm really excited to, continue growing the project more than just as like a passive maintainer. It's really exciting.
That's great, Brooks. Certainly glad to have another cosmonaut on board. Well, I think let's hand off to you. You've got some community callouts, I think, right?
Yeah. Let me go ahead and do that. Darn it. I was pretty sure. Apologies. I got a new computer and need to do the whole Zoom thing where you allow screen sharing. Okay. All right. Just a note, if anybody needs to do that last minute for their whole, community demo, you don't have to quit and relaunch Zoom. It will work if you just tell it to hold on and go later. All right. So just to start, I have a couple of, I know that we call this the community call out, but I want to call out a couple community members and say thank you for either completing a good first issue that we had in our community call out and earning yourself a soon to come contributor t-shirt, or just doing their first contribution. So Matt Wilkinson, thank you so much for taking on one of our good first issues, updating our GitHub actions for Wash. We had a couple outdated stanzas, and they came right in and fixed that up almost like right after the call out, which is pretty awesome. I also want to call out Matt Gilbride. I think he's contributed before back on like in the 0.18 land. He's a fellow employee at Capital One, but he took up another one of our good first issues and kind of got their first contribution in the new age of wasmCloud, where we can now inspect the cache when you're using Wash. So like when you inspect an OCI URL, it doesn't always just pull down the URL. So you're not always like pulling the 25 megabyte provider archive. You can just inspect it from cache right away, really easy. Next, another great contribution from Stuart Harris. Thank you so much for this. This is like part 2 of a 2-part PR addressing one of the things that we wanted help on, which is like giving a hint or correcting users that are taking a look at Wash. And, you know, especially since a lot of our scripting now relies on things like copying and pasting in keys, which are those like 56 character uppercase things we use for actor IDs, provider IDs. You know, we have an opportunity, since we know what the shape of that is like, to do some input validation and let the user know when it looks wrong. So Stuart came in and did some, to be completely honest, magical Rust things that I didn't even know you could do. The thing that I thought was really impressive was this like public ID, which is like has a constant character, like it's like a generic. I just thought this was super neat, and using that. And oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say that's the first time I've actually seen const generics in the wild. They're a relatively new feature to Rust, but that's the first time I've seen somebody do something with them other than like an example or a hello world, and it's very cool.
Yeah. So, and it works great for this type of thing. You can see, like, we can kind of easily start a, you know, check out an ID for an actor or for a host or a provider, things like that. So this was awesome. We're looking to build off of this to do all of the input validation for anything that's in a public key in Wash. And I think Matt Joe Bride is actually taking a look at doing some of that too. Next, I know this is going to be a long section because all you cool community folks keep contributing, and we have to thank you. Ricochet or Bailey, coming in as a relatively new community member, is issuing some awesome fixes for us. They were going through our documentation and going through some of our examples, and like proactively found a place where we made a breaking change without like proper backwards compatibility, which was awesome to have somebody like help us resolve that and get the fix back into Wash. But Bailey was making contributions across a bunch of our repos. So these are just a couple examples here, but had a lot of good things coming in. And last but certainly not least, want to shout out Janitha for taking our public repos, things like wadm, the wasmCloud deployment manager, and really like filling in the blanks for things that we are trying to work on and trying to allocate, but like just haven't quite gotten the bandwidth for working on. And, you know, they really take a lot of initiative in like implementing this kind of functionality from a community standpoint. So thank you so much for doing that. Maybe we can talk about this like PR, like the wadm a little later in this community call if there's stuff to talk about. I know that Janet is on today, so hello, thank you. All right, so that's our little our shout out section. So thank you to everyone in the community. And now is the community call out section. So this is your chance to take an issue like some of these fine folks and get yourself a cool t-shirt and get your little GitHub profile on the repo. So I have 3 for this week. First one is an issue that was filed for wash control. There are a couple different scenarios where we attempt to, for example, we'll try to put a link, and if in this example you don't have proper connectivity to the NATS cluster, you'll get an error. You'll get a fairly descriptive error that we can't advertise the link, the connection has been refused, etc. So it's pretty easy to tell what's going on. But this actually exits with like a successful error code. So this wouldn't ever really affect you if you're just typing in these commands, but if you're scripting something, you would ideally want this to exit with a failure code so that you can, whatever scripting you're doing, you can tell that that was a problem. So first community call out here is to take a look at some of the wash control commands, and if you can reproduce using one of those commands and not actually connecting to a NATS cluster, and you get a successful error code, just changing that so we return an error instead of an OK with that error message. Second one is kind of similar to some of the great work that that Stuart has put into this, and Taylor actually did a very similar PR for like validating or warning when you do wash, cuddle, link, delete. You know, this command, when you put or delete a link def, has a couple of positional arguments. So for link put, you have to do, let's see, my zoom is backwards, actor ID, and then provider ID, and then contract ID. And then for delete, you need to do actor ID and contract ID. So fairly easy to mix up the order here. And if you do it, we don't currently say, hey, you know, this looks like a provider ID, but you probably should have a contract ID here. So it would be great to have, you know, I put a couple of references here into the PRs. It'd be great to have this kind of input validation so we don't accidentally put, you know, link definitions that are not actually going to anything. And last but not least, I have kept this. This one has been in the community call out before, but I really want to keep it because I think that this is a great introduction to like contributing to the OTP runtime. If you haven't touched Elixir before, this would be a great starting point to just contribute a little bit of functionality. And we have a hashtag help channel now in wasmCloud. So if anybody, you know, if you want to take this on and you haven't like used Elixir before, we're happy to point you in the right direction here. And I left a couple of links that might help. So yeah, we've got two wash issues and one for the OTP runtime this week. As usual, I will put these into Slack so that you all can pick them up. And if you're interested, just leave a comment on the issue so that, you know, nobody's duplicating efforts. Yeah, I think that's what I've got for the community callout section. Anybody have any questions about these issues or really anything?
Really appreciate how many of them there were. I mean, I think it's, you know, we can actually, you know, measure and see, you know, how quickly people responded to having an easy onboarding. You know, I think sometimes people want to help, but they just aren't sure where to get started. And I know that like Janitha, like you and Kevin did some pair programming recently, you know, to help move something down the field, and that's incredible. But Brooks, I think what you're doing is super important and super scalable, because it just continues to bring people along and help them feel included and part of a team. Because ultimately, you know, when you look at, you know, we're approaching pretty elite metrics, you know, as we cross 100 contributors. Not many projects get that far, but the most elite contributors, you know, elite projects have, you know, more than 300 on a monthly basis, or over, maybe it's a 6-month rolling window or something like that. BVP's got some great metrics on that if anybody ever wants to read or be interested in that. So I think so these behaviors and taking the time to do this is super critical to building a healthy, inclusive and diverse community. So we help to make the best, you know, WebAssembly runtime that we can be. So thank you, Brooks, for all the hard work on this. Any other questions for Brooks? And then Jordan, are we going to try to do call outs to all those people on Twitter, you know, when we post the video, maybe a little thank you?
Absolutely. As long as we have their Twitter handle, which
I've got
would
most
be tricky. Cool.
I've got most of them linked, so I will share those with you offline.
Cool. Thank you.
Coming around the bases, community stuff. We're still working on the on an event in DC that'll be out there. We're early stages on the WebAssembly Day for Valencia, but we do have our like planning committee going, and we're working on sort of putting together the program committee to go from there. I've already spoken to a bunch of users and have already encouraging people to start doing user talks and getting submissions together. So I think the more the merrier there. as we continue to build this out would be great. At this point, I don't have anything else on the agenda. Open floor. I guess Steve's not feeling great today, so I don't know that we have a sprint plan to review this week. But any other topics we'd want to bring up, or do we, Kevin, Janitha, did you guys want to talk about wadm a little bit?
I haven't actually done much more than what I did for the PR. I did see Kevin's issues, and I need to wrap my head around exactly what needs to be done, but I'll try to pick up from where I did the demo with going from the operator, the Kubernetes operator, into wadm now, which is kind of what I got blocked on when I was trying to run the test, and why I actually ended up fixing or trying to fix most of what was there.
Yeah, I've still got some more stuff that I want to do in there, specifically around things like what you did with the demo, where it accepts the OAM model over a NATS interface as part of the API, and some things like that. So I think there's some more progress that can be made. I just need to repair my time machine so I can get in there and work on it.
A question related to that, actually. So I guess the workflow is going to be call the applies and then call the reconcile. And I think the call out that you had in there was trying to make it functional, but are you imagining that there's going to be some sort of queuing mechanism similar to what the controller does in K8s to retry because if you reconcile, you're going to call the apply again and keep doing it in a loop, and exponential backoffs and things along those lines?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed exactly what needs to happen there. So the like you said, it's kind of set up to be functional so that we could test that, given any state of the lattice and any application deployment model, we know, or we can predict the set of reconciliation measures that are supposed to take place in order to bring about the right state. So it makes the model fairly testable that way. But what's missing from the implementation is exactly what you said, where what we need to do is take that list of reconciliation actions and toss them into a work dispatch queue. And then something is pulling off of the work dispatch queue and converting those items into lattice control function calls. And then at some point, the reconciler will then again compare against the current state of the lattice. And if new work needs to take place, then what we'll probably have to do is, work in some configurable timeouts and backoffs to prevent it from, doing double work and things like that. We don't want the reconciliation tick timer to be too fast, because this is the same problem that the Kubernetes controllers have if they're configured wrong too, which is if you try and reconcile too fast, you will try and correct the cluster multiple times, and so you'll overcompensate, and what you end up with is like this pre-derivative curve where you overcompensate in one direction, reconcile, and then you overcompensate for your overcompensation, and so on. And it's a classic autonomous agent problem. But if we just kind of follow some of the examples that Kubernetes has in the way those operators work, we should be able to get that to kind of smooth that curve out.
Yeah, I was going to try and take some examples out of controller runtime, because that's all abstracted out now to the controller runtime, and then try and map it to Elixir, which is still kind of alien to me, I think, in terms of the syntax, but I'm getting used to it. And thank you for the suggestion of using a language server. That's definitely made my life a lot easier, because I was using a different plugin before.
Nice. I'm glad that helped.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, so it's interesting to see how that continues to come together, and that's super exciting. Any questions for Janitha or Kevin? All right, open floor. Any other notes or things that we'd want to align on today?
I do have to apologize for my wonky title for the PR that I had, because it was actually reworking something that broke, and I've like specifically done for Kevin's benefit and not necessarily for the community.
Not at all. Not at all. I think if you go in and read the PRs, there are some real gems in there. Taylor, you had one the other day. I don't even remember what it was, but I actually lolled when I read it. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I do that. And today I had another one. I don't remember what the other one was, but sometimes I just, rather than like throwing a bunch of like swearing in my PR commits, which I mean, that's a great Twitter one, the one that scrapes GitHub for profanity laden commits. But rather than doing that, I try to just do it into dark humor. So anyway, yeah, I had one today.
Yeah, maybe that's the one that was that all kind of blends together. But
Yeah, there are some days where the only joy you can scrape out of the bottom of the barrel from life is funny commits on your Git messages.
yeah. Okay, wonderful. Well, I'll go ahead and stop recording, and as usual, we can hang out and go from there. Have a great week.